some people have come across different kind of issues or warning sign that we are seeing on the screen right now, and that is engine oil pressure. Sometimes the problem could be oil pressure too high. In this case is engine oil pressure too low. So see, it can be caused by a lot of things. Can be caused, any of these two faults that I just mentioned, too high or too low, could be caused by engine oil, maybe like a bad oil, can be caused by oil filter, engine oil filter. It can also be caused by like components inside the engine, like worn out crankshaft, camshaft, failing oil pump or failed oil pump. It all depends. But one of the most common components that fails, that give this kind of warning, specifically this one you are looking at on the screen, that's engine oil pressure too low. One of the components that cause this warning sign is the oil pressure sensor. Some might call it oil pressure switch. So now when I mean oil pressure sensor, it could actually not be the sensor itself. It could be the connection to the sensor, like the wiring connector or plug attached on the sensor. So the sensor itself. It could get all kinds of oil pressure warning, but I'm just limiting this video to oil pressure too low. So most times it means there's a leakage which is not helping the pressure to build up, and which could come from the sensor itself, because that's like the weakest part of the line that works with the oil pressure. So it has a plastic part on the sensor itself, which can crack or break, whatever, as they age. So now, what does the sensor look like? Okay, let's go back here. Now, this is the sensor. This is the oil pressure sensor, switch, whatever I want to call it. Now, this sensor is usually attached on or around the oil filter. For example, if your oil filter has oil cooler, if the filter is attached on the oil cooler, sometimes it could be on the oil cooler itself. Sometimes it could be just on the engine block, but very close to the oil filter. My point is, you easily find this oil pressure engine oil pressure sensor around the oil filter. So if you want to look for yours, where it's located, start from there. Any switch or sensor you find around the engine oil filter is most likely going to be it. However, there are also easier way of finding out. Now, there are some Peugeot engines that the connection to their oil pressure sensor might differ. For example, the EW engines, the ES engines, even the ZN3J engine, the connection to the oil pressure sensor is just one wire. So it means on the plug attached on the sensor, you will only find one wire on it. For example, as you can see here, you can see only one pin is inside the sensor, so it means it has only one connection to it. So when you find you could find like two. For example, now this is ES engine, that's the V6 you find in newer Peugeot vehicles like 406, 407 and the rest. So you could see there are two sensors here. and you can see the engine oil filter, and then there are two here. So that brown one, or you could see this one that I'm talking about. This is the sensor with that color brownish or something. I don't know if there's another name for the color. And it's only one wire, orange, that enters the wiring connector. While there's another one that has a green colored plug on the sensor. So in other words, you'll find two sensors or switches very close to the oil filter. So you now have to find which one that actually is the oil pressure sensor. So like I explained, the oil pressure sensor is, for these engines, has only one wiring connector. So if you find one with up to 2 or 3 wiring connectors, then it's not the oil pressure sensor. That one is usually the oil level sensor, which is also it does also the function of oil temperature. So at least now there are some other engines like the THP engine. Their own is different. You also find it around that oil filter, but I think it has more than one wiring connector. I'm not sure, but I think it does. So, but like I said, this sensor or the switch is around. You always find it around the engine oil filter. Okay, so what you do is, for example, this is the bottom part of it. Even when you remove the sensor, you can tell from the look, the bottom, the part of it, if it's for the oil pressure sensor. So what you could do is start by, if you are getting this kind of warning, now start by removing the assessing the sensor itself. Sometimes the wiring connector can pull out. Maybe they did some work there or something and it wasn't plugged back in very well, or in the process of some repairs they did, the connector was cracked, so it wasn't properly plugged in. Or once you start getting that one, first of all, locate the sensor, confirm that the wiring connector is intact, that it's not broken, or it's probably not plugged in. Or if it's plugged in, check. Now if it's plugged in and the connector is very well and the issue remains, check the wire, that particular one wire or the wires attached on it. Find out to be sure there's no short circuit, it's not stripped, it's not touching any part of the body. Just make sure the wires are intact. If the issue continues after that check, you could also check to know if the sensor is wet with oil. Now sometimes the engine might be leaking oil around that place and it may not actually be the sensor. For example, you can see this one, but it wasn't really it may be confusing. You might feel that the oil is leaking, but in this case, if you look at that place very well, you could see there is no oil actually around or on the sensor. So, but if you find out that, if you check and see that the sensor is actually very, very wet, I could see oil dropping from it, it means it's actually the issue will be from the sensor. That's the plastic part of it. Most times, for example, it cracks and start leaking from around that place where the pin is. Like I said, it has a plastic part, so that's the one that usually fails. You won't be able to hold the pressure, or whatever reasons, if it's leaking, it's usually around this area. So what you could do is to change the sensor. The sensor is not even expensive. I don't know how much a new one costs, but a used one is very cheap. For example, in Nigeria, you can get it as cheap as 2,000, 3,000. I don't know, it's a jar, but I don't think it will be more than 5,000. But it's a very cheap product. So start by changing it first. Once you confirm the wiring connector or the wire itself both are intact, you could try by changing the sensor and see if the issue goes away. So before you go into trying to change the oil filter, change other things, or tear out your engine to see if your crankshaft is the cause or others, start with this, the list or the cheapest part of the elimination. That's components that are listed for elimination method. That should be the first to deal with because it's the cheapest and usually the cost. So don't go and start changing your engine when it could be a minor thing that probably may not even cost you money. Imagine if the issue was just because when they were changing the engine oil filter, they mistakenly disconnected it and didn't plug it back, or they actually didn't disconnect it, but something hit the plastic part of the sensor or hit the connector and it was broken. Whatever it is, or even if the sensor is bad, even if it's not even leaking, but it's give this warning. I always tell people, at least start by replacing it. It could be the sensor internally is bad, the electronic part of it, something is wrong inside. So it's a very cheap thing. Like I said, for example, ES engine, EW engine, they all use basically the same sensor. So you can always switch or get it from any of these engines and swap in and see if the issue goes away. Okay, I hope this helps, and that's all.